This week, featuring a downtown Hamilton haunt. Seems to be the only safe way to do it these days. It's time to talk about the greatest department store around, the Wright House. I don't know. Maybe the opening might have confused you a tad bit. If you're not from the city of Hamilton, I understand the confusion. If you're in the city, or from the city, or familiar with the city, then you know exactly what's going on. Yeah, I had to do this years ago. I think it was 2006. Downtown Hamilton was just like getting so bad. Didn't feel like you were safe down there for different reasons. We actually had a security guard who would come along on some of the tours just in case there was any problems. And for about 2 years, the tour was shut down. So 2006 to 2008, if I'm not mistaken. But then they tried to clean it up, right? They put in the CCTV cameras. They brought in the big police station on King William. And that seemed to calm things down, where you could go down there safely again. I do remember it was like I didn't have a security guard anymore. For years, I was actually able to attempt to expand that tour. Hired Ghost Guy Graham to come in and lead tours. So it was looking good. People wanted to come into the core. Businesses were returning. Definitely the abandoned buildings were disappearing, being replaced by restaurants and shops and stuff. And it was wonderful. I mean, I was like, okay, we're going in the right direction. And then, as you all know, there was a certain time in our history that hit. I would say, let's say 2020, remain nameless. And this seemed to turn it in a different direction. Now, I know Hamilton is not the only city in Canada or in the world that is experiencing these types of problems, but it looks like it's going in the wrong direction again. I mean, if you walk through downtown Hamilton, yeah, I mean, you'll see these condo skyscrapers going up. There's multiple skyscrapers that are going up, but this weird feeling, like other than certain pockets, especially the core itself where Gore Park is, that seems to be going in the wrong direction. So a lot of the businesses have moved out, shut down. Some of them, especially in the International Village, they're complaining to the police that they need more of them down there to watch the shops because they're experiencing a lot of problems. Not on the same level as what you might be seeing in videos from San Francisco or Los Angeles or places like that, but it's getting worse. Now, our tours were in a very bad position for this because the Downtown Hamilton tour, which is the original, I have a very nice place in my heart for these tours because it was technically the first official ones that were ever done over 20 years ago. So I've always held on to that. People say, well, why are you doing tours in downtown Hamilton? Because it's kind of a rough place to be. It has been for many, many years. And I was like, the stories down there, the history, they're second to none. It was a very interesting tour, great stories to hear about. Showing off these beautiful, amazing buildings. You know, it was worth it. Was. That's the key word. Was worth it. Because this year, I normally don't get scared by this stuff. I personally will go down there and lead a tour. I'll have somebody who is having troubles. They'll come up and they'll scream at us. I've actually had one of them try and throw things. And I'll say, he didn't throw anything directly at me. He was throwing it on the ground in front of me. So he wasn't trying to hurt me. I think he just wanted to be taken in, which is very sad. And I feel for the situation and the people. But then now you're hearing stories. I mean, if you don't know and you don't want to depress yourself, don't bother looking it up. But if you do want to know, happen to live in the city and for some reason you haven't heard these stories, but there's a lot of violence going around down there. Down in the core for sure, other parts of Hamilton as well, and in relation to shootings and guns, which is, as a lifelong Canadian, unheard of. You know, I always looked at the United States and I saw the type of violence that they had down there, and I said, oh, this isn't Canada. That's not how we roll, but it seems to be changing. That is unrelated to what I'm originally talking about, but in the end, it's just not comfortable to be down there leading a tour, especially at night. Still got the Dark History Tour, and instead of doing it in the evenings, I've now moved it to Sundays at 3, which if you're interested, shameless plug. Even though this is very serious, I have to put a plug in the middle of it because it's a business strategy. But if you are interested, I got one coming up this Sunday. I am personally leading it. Hamilton's Dark History, March 17th at 3 p.m. We don't go down to Gore Park. We stay kind of above the core, and it's in the afternoon, so everybody will be fine. But doing the downtown night tour just isn't in the cards right now. So downtown Hamilton is 100% on hiatus for the entire season this year. It will continue to be on hiatus until the quote-unquote challenges of the core have been, alleviated. Now, I'd like to give a quick shout-out and thanks to Janice Gibbs. It is her recommendations. She's sending me a lot of great recommendations for upcoming shows. I will feature as many as possible. And thank you very much for the recommendation, or reminder, I should say, of The Right House. Because shockingly, I haven't done this one yet. It was featured on the Downtown Hamilton tour. Maybe that's the reason why I avoided it. But, expect this. Expect some other downtown landmarks to come up in future shows. So thanks a lot, Janice. I really appreciate the reminder. So if you might be thinking I'm going to be talking about a business that no longer exists, you're exactly right. But if you think I'm talking about a building that no longer exists, you'd be wrong. Because the Right House department store building is still there. If you're not familiar, if you look at downtown Hamilton, you can do a search for 35 King Street East in Hamilton. And then if you click on the Google Street View, you can see the building. Look up at it. It's very beautiful. And it's got the Tim Hortons in it. It's got the bubble tea place in it. So you'll recognize it. Anyway, that's the Right House. So that building is still used today. It's office space on the upper levels. Bottom level, you got some businesses. Space for lease, if anybody's interested. But this was originally the brainchild of a man named Thomas C. Watkins. Now, Watkins had been a big part of downtown Hamilton for a lot of years, going back to the mid-1800s. So 1847, before the country was even really the country, he's in downtown Hamilton running a hardware store on James Street. Now, he eventually would close this location, and that's when he went into the business of wholesale. Now, a little Hamilton connection there is the wholesale business was brought into the city and the region, like Southern Ontario, by a man named Isaac Buchanan. Very well-known Hamiltonian, if you know Auchmar Mansion. If you don't, look it up, Auchmar. Auchmar Mansion was his summer home, and his winter home was in the downtown core on James Street South. So Buchanan brought in this idea of wholesale, being able to sell off, bulk merchandise from the wholesale, like cutting out the middleman of retail so that he can save money for the customer. And I guess Watkins, he saw the advantage of this, so he jumps into that business. Now, he jumped into it was maybe about a decade or so after Buchanan started. He had Hamilton, he had Toronto, I believe he had Guelph as well as his locations, and Hamilton being his home. So maybe this was what brought the idea. So he opens a wholesale warehouse, Watkins does, on King Street, not too far. It was actually directly beside where the Right House is today. If you guys know where the Kresge's used to be, there's now a condo building, aforementioned condo building, going up on that spot. That's where he used to run the wholesale, and then eventually he jumps over and builds the Right House. Now, the Right House is built starting in 1890, and during this time, his wife, beloved wife, died after a 13-year illness. She died in 1891, so during the most busy and transformative time in his life, he's also dealing with this on the side. It'd be stressful, right? be stressful on anybody. There's to change the type of person that he is, make him a tougher person, not caring so much about the normal stresses that other businessmen and women would have to go through. So it probably shifted his personality a tad. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about is that Watkins was kind of a practical joker. He was well known for this by the employees and even the customers. He was very forward-facing, kind of locally famous guy. If you look up the old Hamilton Spectator advertisements for the Wright House, it usually included his name during the time that he was still alive. So he was kind of locally beloved. And doing these practical jokes and stuff maybe it was his way of connecting. Maybe the tragedy that he went through with his wife is what turned him into somebody who just wanted to have more fun with life. So the Wright House, 1890 to 1893, is completely done, and for the next 10 or so years, served the city quite well. And Thomas Watkins, he wasn't around for that long when you consider it after the Wright House, because he already was at an advanced age. So when the Wright House was finished, he was 72 years old. Now, most of us would want to retire when we're 65 or 70, and this guy is still going strong, trying to change his business and open the greatest department store that the province of Ontario has ever seen. And he's doing it at 72. I mean, this guy has already had a full life. I don't know if it was just a project because of what was going on with his wife, but either way, he put his entire heart and soul into it, and he got it completed. So he personally runs it for the next 10 or so years, and he dies in the year 1903 at the advanced age of 85. After that, his children take over the family business and continue to run it well, but, this wasn't really for them. It's better to get somebody in who knows what they're doing, that can support the department store and keep it running. So within 6 years, in 1901, it was then sold off to another interest, and the department store would run that way again until it finally shut down in the year 1983. Now, the reason it didn't survive, downtown core starts falling at that point. So, the downtown core, if you look at the old historic pictures of Hamilton, used to be a very regal place to visit. The type of stores you had there, the beautiful buildings, people would want to go down, you see them wearing their dresses and their suits. It was really a thing to do. But it just kind of degraded throughout the years, like a lot of cores did. Even in Toronto, if you know the area where Yonge Dundas Square is, it was the same kind of thing. It just kind of falls into depravity, and you get the wrong type of folks that are coming down and frequenting the businesses. They can't survive. You also had a bus strike at the time, so people couldn't get down there. And you also had the opening of Lime Ridge Mall on Hamilton Mountain, so you used to have to go downtown to do all the shopping, but as the cities get larger, it's not always convenient to go downtown. So the bus strike, the people can't get down to the shop. Lime Ridge Mall, you can go up there and get your free parking and shop however you want. All of this kind of combines together, and the Wright House couldn't survive. So 1983, it closed, remained vacant for about 6 more years, and then it was reopened as a mall. And then within about 6 years after that, it was taken over by a property management company who turned it into what you see there today. I mentioned the office space and whatnot. Now, you heard me say that this was the nicest department store in all of Ontario. I actually messed up. I know I don't normally mess up, but I messed up there, and I apologize for this. It wasn't the nicest, most modern store in Ontario. It was considered the nicest and most modern department store in all of Canada. So this is one of those screw-ups that actually turns out to be better than I thought. I wasn't giving it its comeuppance, so then I just did. So I've done my job. This place was the place to shop. Beautiful, beautiful place. I don't know if any of my listeners ever had a chance to go inside of it. It closed in 1983. That's very possible. I was even alive. I was a child then. And I'm always going to be angry at my parents for not taking me down to the core to see places such as this. We usually stayed where we lived in the East End and didn't traverse out that much. Went down to the core after things started to fall apart, which, I got to ask my mom about that. But still, it was a great place to go. I don't know about towards the end, One of the reasons why, when it originally opened up, a lot of places weren't as tall as this one was. Considered one of the first skyscrapers in the core. It had elevators, which made it possible to go up and down. In fact, Watkins, he absolutely loved those elevators. I'll talk about that in a second. But note that this building marked the first for a lot of things related to businesses in all of Canada. This includes, get this, the first to employ lady clerks. This is a quote here, I guess, from The Spectator. It was a fortunate and profitable innovation, as the novelty of being served by a lady behind the counter at once attracted an unusual custom to the store. So I assume it was it was mostly men back in the day. Would the men also serve like the perfume and the was it work in the women's underwear section? I don't know, how do they handle situations like that? So first to employ lady clerks in Canada. First in Hamilton to install overhead cash carrying system. So these are the pneumonic tubes, the air tubes, I guess, would carry all the stuff back and forth between the store. Very important is the first private telephone system connecting all store departments. This was the first for all of Canada. First large advertisement ever published in a Hamilton newspaper. First to install a Reader's Club library. First to stage a fashion show with living models. As a side note, I forget her name. Yeah, no, I forget it, but there was a woman that was brought in to announce these fashion shows, was one of the more famous models of the day, a beauty contestant who was connected with Rudolph Valentino, like a famous person in Hollywood. They brought her in as one of the people to kind of really kick this off with a bang. First departmental store in Hamilton to adopt policies of selling all home furnishings on a gradual payment basis. So that's a very long line to say they had layaway plans. First to establish a guarantee, goods satisfactory or your money refunded. That wasn't done very often back in those days. I know it's pretty common today in our Amazon world, but back then not so much. First to introduce a suburban delivery system. You guys get it? This is Uber Eats. They did Uber Eats before Uber Eats was even a thought. As like I don't know when exactly this delivery system was happening, but I mean on the initial end of this department store being put up, it would have been horse-drawn carriages. So imagine it's like Uber Eats in a horse-drawn carriage. First department store to establish a charge account system, so I guess like credit cards today. First to establish a policy of selling goods at one price. So goods marked in plain figures and sold at only one price, which I assume is like the price matching that a lot of department stores do today. So that's it. I mean, the telephone thing just blows my mind. The first telephone exchange system in Canada, it was also the second in all of North America. So comparative to Mexico and the United States, the White House was the second to ever be done. So you see it? You see how crucial, how beautiful the White House department store was to the downtown core. So you understand the history now and what surrounded it being created, and Watkins' view of the future and his love for these new ideas turned it into something special. But something special, unfortunately, can sometimes gather the wrong attention. In the year 1923, this would have been long after Watkins was dead, the White House running is sell like jewelry and whatnot, so they knew that there would be a lot of money inside there, and the movies of heists were already probably starting even back then. And this is like right out of the movies. There was a heist that occurred inside the White House. It was two criminals who had escaped Kingston Penitentiary. So from Kingston, they were heading to the United States. And as they were going through, they would pick some towns and cities to go into, and then they would rob stores at night to get money so they could take it with them to the United States and start their new life. So in 1923, when this all occurred, they had broken into a couple smaller places as they're making their rounds And eventually on that evening, they found their way to the Wright House. So I assume it would have the jewelry in the front window. You know, their windows were considered, they call it like a crystal palace, saying it was like the beautiful view from inside, so that the customers would be drawn into the store. But it had the wrong effect in this regard. So this robbery took place, and I think the best way to describe this, there was a Toronto Star article from 1923 that talked about it. And the headline here is "Bandits Working a Way Through the Peninsula." So they would go through, they would rob a bunch of people. And then talking about the Wright House robbery, they said, after thorough investigation, the Hamilton police are completely baffled as to the identity or whereabouts of the Yeggs. The term is Yeggs. I had to look this up, and it's just an old-fashioned term. It means one that breaks open safes to steal, aka safecracker. The whereabouts of the Yeggs who bound and gagged Jonathan Gilbert and George Sweet, night watchman of the Wright House, and then coolly drilled into the safe, blew off the door with nitroglycerin, and made away with $15,000 in cash. Now, just for context, that's about $300,000 in today's money. So it's a chunk of change. So made off with $15,000 in cash. Quote, "It was a smooth job," summed up Detective Joseph Chamberlain, who was working on the case. Now, this part just absolutely floors me. I love the detail that they used to go into in these newspaper articles. If you don't know, it was like, just kind of look some of them up. Go to your local library, look at some of the ones from like the 1800s, early 90s. They were written like books. And they would go into such detail and just throw off these amazing facts that sometimes had nothing to do with the event at all. This is a good example of that. So we have a quote that was given, I assume it was by the detective again, saying, "For experienced burglars, the Hamilton job was easy. The watchmen are both elderly men. They were not armed, and they were caught unprepared. There was no signal service in the building, and carpets, quilts, pillows, and everything else necessary to deaden sound were right at hand." Quote, "These crooks were of the gentleman type, too. Why? Gilbert, who was one of the security men, is an old fellow and has been off worse sick with rheumatitis several times. And the robbers took him up to the washroom and tied him to a bar on the floor. He complained." So the security guard is complaining to the criminals who are robbing his store. He complained. He said, "Don't leave me on this cold, damp marble floor, boys. It will be the death of me." And the thieves, they're like, "Oh, sorry, Grandpa, we're gonna help you out." So one of the thieves then went out. He collected oilcloth covers, piled them up on the floor to make like a little bit of a padding, and then went and got some rugs from a different department. I'm telling you, the Wright House had everything. Brought the rugs in there and put them, and then put the chained up watchman, the handcuffed watchman, on top of this little haphazardly made bed. So as far as I know, the criminals got away, because even in this article, they said they didn't know who the criminals were. They knew that a couple broke out of Kingston Penitentiary. I think in the end, they weren't 100% sure if it was them who robbed the Wright House. I personally think it was, because there wasn't any others. They were going and robbing a ton of places. The timing fit, but I guess the detective didn't want to say anything outright until he knew for sure. In the end, they just got away with all the money. But the details behind this is like your security experts are just a couple of older men, I guess, in their retirement. This is something that they like to do. It's like Walmart greeters. You know, they're not going to, go and try and beat up these criminals. And why would you? The criminals seem like very nice people. So I wouldn't want to beat them up. In fact, in the end, maybe they helped them. Like, yeah, just chain us up, take whatever you want. Just don't hurt us. Such a deep history. I mean, downtown Hamilton was really an interesting place to be back in those days. Just look up the old pictures, see the beautiful buildings that used to be down there. And just knowing that type of history exists and the energy that comes from it, I mean, there should be no doubt that the Wright House department store has energy to it and has a ghost. Now, I'll just throw it out to you off the top of your head. Who do you think the ghost is? I'll give you a second. I know it wasn't. It was Thomas Watkins. I mean, come on. It's like this guy in his later years, working his entire life, trying to build him up to the point when he can open the right house. Here's his opportunity. It's now open. He only gets to be in there for 10 years. And, you know, it was like he was so closely connected to it. And he spent every single day inside that building. And yes, every day he would go there, even on the weekends. And on one days of the weekend, he would go in, but he wouldn't go in as the boss. He went in as a elevator conductor. Okay, you might be thinking, well, why would he do that? Well, here's the thing that I hinted about earlier. He loved the elevators. In fact, you could fathom a guess that even though he was a retail guy, that he wanted elevators more than even having a department store, because he just wanted to play with them. This new technology that could take you up and down inside of a building, not having to walk upstairs anymore and hurt his knees. You know, this is something that he adored. So the only chance he got, like his one and only day off on the weekend, is not staying home and relaxing. He came in dressed up as one of those elevator conductors, the ones that work the little levers and stuff, open and close the door, and he would work that the entire day. Had so much fun. Now, I mentioned that he loved this, but he also loved playing pranks. And here's a perfect opportunity for him to do such. And even though they were his customers, and I think if something like this happened today, it would be met in a very different way. I'm thinking 1-star reviews on Google reviews. But back then, they loved him for this kind of thing. So he would play jokes on them. Playing jokes on the customers, like pretending he didn't really know how to work the controls, you know, taking them the wrong direction, opening the door on the wrong floor, sometimes in the dark basement where no customers should go. Is probably very scary down there. One occasion they said he had women in beautiful dresses standing behind him, that he stopped it between the floors and told them to climb out. I'm sure he didn't make them climb out, but he told them to do it. And again, some people would get upset, but back then he's like, yeah, he's playing a prank. Here's a guy we love, very connected to the city. There was a lot of fun around this. So to know that that was the case, 100% true history inside this building, again, I will ask you a trivia question. What is the ghostly experience that happens today? I'll wait for you. Yeah, I know. You already know that one too. It's the elevators. The elevators will constantly act weird. Now, I've heard stories over the years that have been conveyed. People coming on the tour, you know, they used to work in the building, or they currently were working in the building at a time, or they knew somebody who had worked in the building, and hearing the stories of how the elevator doors will open without being called, that sometimes they go inside and different buttons had been pushed. And the one story that was shared to me now, you know, just setting this up, you know, standing in downtown Hamilton, you have this group in front of you, very regular folks. You have a young lady, like not even like a younger lady, who I could tell like throughout the tour she wasn't really too into the ghost stories, you know, very much into the history, you know, who steps forward and says that she had an experience inside the Wright House in relation to the elevators. So I'm interested. I just assume it's going to be something similar to what I've heard in the past. It wasn't. So she said she was in the building. I think she was there to visit somebody, maybe like I think it might have been a real estate agent or something like that. So the real estate agent had told her which floor to go to, but she had forgotten, like she was about to walk into the elevator on the first level and she's going to push the button, but she can't remember which number it was. And she's thinking, what is it? What is it? What is it? So focused on that. And then it just kind of like screams out in her head, the number to push. And after that, she looks down to hit the button, and guess which button's already been pushed for her? That one. The number that she had forgotten that just popped in their head. And when it popped in their head, she didn't see it get pressed or the light up, because she was so focused on trying to remember what it was. When she looks down, and it's that one that's lit up. None of the others. She probably just hit the open door button and took the stairs. At least that's what I would have done. Actually, no, I take that back. I would have rode the elevator. I think at that point, you're kind of already all in, right? If you have a ghostly experience, you know, you're not going to... I would hope you guys, if you're listening to my podcast, wouldn't run from something like this. I take it all back. I would not run into... I would run into danger to have a ghostly experience, which I have had done many times in the past. And so I'm going to say that this young lady, she looked tough to me. I remember her face. She looked like a tough young lady. I say that she rode the elevator up to that floor and took her chances with Thomas's ghost and lived to tell the tale. All right, that's the show, everyone. Now, before I bow out, I have a quick announcement I'm going to make. It's very important. If you love going on these ghost tours, I have an opportunity for you. Join the monthly newsletter list. I will add it to the description of this podcast below it. And as well, if you want, you just go to ghostwalks.com, go to the contact page, and then you'll see a section that says free ghost stories. Add your email to that. Because what's going to happen is in the next few days, I'm going to announce our first new ghost walk in a few years in the town of Dundas. Now, this is kind of like a replacement for the Downtown Hamilton tour. On the other side of it, I've been kind of on and off planning this tour for quite a few years now. Finally got it in place. Got some great stories. Talked to a lot of the businesses there. The historical buildings, the history, the ghost stories all around. This is a wonderful location. I am so excited to lead this tour for you guys. There will be a couple of early, I like to call them vintage price nights. So in March and the beginning of April, end of March, beginning of April, it will be 2 special nights to kick off this tour. You'll be hearing the script as is told in the original form. And the price will be about $7.50 each plus tax. So this is just half price of the normal one that will be charged moving forward. So join the newsletter list. You'll get an email when this is announced, probably within the next few days, and have first opportunity to jump in and grab those spots. There won't be a lot of them. We're going to keep the numbers low for the first 2, and you can be part of the number 1 and number 2 runs of the new Dundas tour, which I'm very excited for, and I hope to see you guys there. Anyway, that's the show, everyone. Again, if you enjoy this podcast, best way to support me, just leave a review. However you listen, Apple, Spotify, Google, I don't care. Just leave a great review, tell us what you think, and then I know you're listening out there, and that makes me very happy. Thanks. I'll talk to you next week.